Welcome into 11 Personnel. Nick Roush here with Adam Luckett. 11 Personnel always brought to you by our good friends at Monticello Bank, where today we're joined by a very special guest. You've heard him call Kentucky basketball and football games for decades. Now you're hearing him on 11 Personnel. It's the voice of the Wildcats, Tom Leach. Tom, thanks so much for being on today. I feel like we run into you all the time, but never in a formal setting like this, so appreciate you coming on and chatting with us today.
Happy to help out, guys.
Well, I want to talk a little football and a little horse racing, but I want to start because we had some good questions from fans. You've called games at a ton of places. Do you have a favorite venue to call either a UK football or a UK basketball game?
Football on the road venues, it's Georgia. And a lot of that is from the broadcaster perspective. Um, Most places our booth is at the top of the upper deck somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're really, really high up. Whereas Georgia, it'll probably change at some point, but for now, it is still a flatter view. It's where we used to be at UK before they renovated, and our spot. We're actually closer to midfield with the renovation, which is nice. But that angle at Georgia is a flatter angle, and I just like the vantage point,
Mm-hmm.
and also there's a lot of history. It kind of feels like the quintessential college football Saturday venue, down between the hedges, and they've got that bridge up on one end where people can stop and watch. And usually, it's an important game
Mm-hmm.
for Kentucky, which we're invested in. So, yeah, that's definitely my favorite in football. And in basketball, no place I love doing games in rough. I tell you, the one that would be at the top of the list, and I am a New York Knicks fan back to the days of Walt Frazier and Willis Reed in 1970 when they won the title. And the few times we have gotten to do a game at courtside at the Garden is right probably at the top of my list, just for that connection to the New York Knicks. Cal's first year, they played UConn there. And when we do the Champions Classic there, now it's a long-winded answer, but we do the Champions Classic, we're up in what they call the hockey press box, which is much higher,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's nothing special. But that first year Cal was here, they played UConn. John Wall was great. Kentucky won 64-61. Just a great game, big crowd at the Garden, at courtside. And I was really looking forward to Kentucky being there in the Sweet 16 game this year. If they had been able to get past Kansas State, we would have been at courtside at the Garden at a meaningful game. So those are the two probably that are first off the top of my mind.
Yeah, I think Tom, me and Nick are right there with you on the Georgia. Where we sit, I mean, it's like you're in the crowd almost. And you're
Yeah,
outside. You can just feel the energy of the place. You get to see all the fans walk in from the end zone and fill up the bleachers. Athens is kind of like, if you were going to make an SEC town, that's kind of how you would draw it up, with the stadium right in the middle of campus, with everything they have to offer there. And all the tradition and the history. It's right up there. I'm right there with you.
I do think I know what would be the worst venue too. I remember a recent Champions Classic where you all were at the United Center, and I don't think they make binoculars powerful enough to be able to see the court from up there in the rafters up at the United Center. Uh,
where we weren't as high up, but we're in the corner. And if you're from a broadcaster perspective, it's kind of if you're talking about coming, going, left, right, those kind of phrases that you use to kind of give people an idea of what they're seeing. It's a little more difficult, more challenging from an angle. The two that leap to mind for being the worst, years ago, they did a test run for the Final Four games in stadiums and selling out the whole stadium.
mm-hmm.
And they had that game called the Basket Bowl at Ford Field
Oh
between
yeah.
Kentucky and Michigan State. And we actually did the game from the football press box. So my choices were call the game through binoculars or call it off TV and maybe be a little behind. So we called a basketball game with binoculars, and then the other one is Auburn. This should not be allowed in the SEC. Should not allow this, but they put their own radio crew in the end zone too, and the radio crews are in the end zone. It's an awful vantage point to work a game, and if you're serious about football, and the SEC is, that should not be allowed.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This is a little bit tangential. I know you'll do some. Will you be hosting for the national radio for NBC Sports again this year?
No, they changed a couple of years ago, and I think they just take the TV feed on radio now. So I had a great time doing Triple Crown with the Horse Racing Radio Network guys, and we had a lot of fun doing those games. Got to do a few Derby walkovers, and I think they just take the TV feed now.
When you've been to a lot of race courses, do you have a personal favorite? Maybe outside of the home course there at Keeneland.
Yeah, outside of the tracks here in Kentucky, Keeneland would be at the top, and Churchill. It's kind of a coin flip, Saratoga and Del Mar. Del Mar's you've got the ocean right there, beautiful setting. Saratoga, I think the racing's a little better than Del Mar, and just all the history. I went to Saratoga several years ago just as a fan, and you turn onto Union Avenue off the I can't remember if it's interstate or a state highway, and this was opening weekend at Saratoga, and there's a banner proclaiming the start of the Saratoga meet, and when you see the date, I said that had to be around the time of the Gettysburg Address. It's like Saratoga opened 2 weeks after the Gettysburg Address, so a place with that kind of history is pretty cool.
Wow, that's that is pretty crazy. Fast forward to the future, this Kentucky football offseason, I feel like there's been a lot of changes within the program, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I know you probably aren't breaking down the season opener against Ball State, but do you think Kentucky addressed enough of its needs in the offseason to kind of fix the offense, for lack of a better term, in 2023?
Looks like it, with picking up another tackle, but then, excuse me, you lose 2 tackles in Wallabaugh and Buford to the transfer portal, assuming they don't make a U-turn and come back. That I'm guessing they might ideally like to find another tackle just for depth purposes, or you're counting on somebody who hasn't been tested yet. I know Nick Hall's just one that comes to mind that could figure more prominently in the mix. But you felt like they picked up the transfer from Southern Cal, Cortland Ford, and he's in the mix to start. And I guess that's just the way it is, this day and time with how the sport has changed, and not just football, but all of them. And it's going to be hard to hang on to much depth. It seems like, it's hard. I'm assuming it'll be hard for most teams to have a really quality backup quarterback, because as soon as somebody gets beat out, they'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tom. Just like even covering the sport 3 years ago was vastly different than it is now. What I want to talk about is, I think, what everybody's kind of looking forward to is not only Devin Leary, but who he's throwing to. When you look at Berrien Brown, Dane Key, Jordan Dingle, all this talent they have here, where would you, I guess, we got to see these guys do it on the field, but just rank it from a skill aspect. It seems like one of the most talented wide receiver rooms they've had in recent history.
Absolutely. I mean, probably the best in recent times. Coach Brooks' tenure when they had Tammy as the tight end, and Stevie Johnson, Keenan Burton, Dickie Lyons. But they've got even, more depth. No guys have still got to get to that level, but they certainly seem to have the potential to do it. Dane, Berrien, et cetera. And the tight end group. So they have to prove it to the level that group did. But if they can, it looks like they would have even more depth. You look at offense, they lose C-Rod, but there's I'm intrigued by the kid who got hurt early last year, Ramon Jefferson, Ray Davis, McLean. So you've got guys there to have some depth, and you lose C-Rod, but I think you're probably optimistic you can be fine there. So it really, for me on the offensive side, comes down to how much improvement do we see in that offensive line. And if it's significant, then they seem to have all the other pieces that you would want.
It all comes down the line, Nick, doesn't it? I mean, that's just what we can't get around it. I mean, we've just been talking. I mean,
Yeah.
season's still 4 months away, and that's the one. I keep coming back to. At least it's like, well, they got this, this, and this, but can they block anybody? Can they do
And it
this?
looks better on paper
all,
than it did.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Last year you're trying to kind of, you're moving Horsey out because you don't have anybody that's better at tackle, whereas you take away, he was a serviceable tackle, and he's an all SEC caliber left guard. And so you have to, weaken the guard position to make the tackle position better. And I say weaken the guard position. Jagger was solid, but he was a freshman versus a guy who had a lot of experience at that guard position. So now you've got the two guards back in their right spots. You've got two guys who are, really legit tackles. They've got to still prove it at this level. And then Burton moves to center. And it seemed like they got increasingly more optimistic about how that looked over the course of spring. And, it's on paper, it looks good. And you'd like to have a little more depth, but it looks good on paper. It's just got to be proven on the field. And I'm optimistic that can happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So we'll have to wait and see.
Before we move on to pick a few ponies for the folks, I always ask this of former players when they finish up their career, kind of when you look back on it, what's the one game that stands out to you? You've called countless big Kentucky football wins under Mark Stoops. I know that hopefully there's plenty more to go, but when you look back on this run, is there any one that really stands out above the rest where you probably didn't even realize it was happening as it was happening in the radio booth?
In recent times, the Citrus Bowl win where, not only they won a New Year's Day bowl game over a name like Penn State, but you had Benny break the school rushing record, which goes back to Sonny Collins, or went back to Sonny Collins. So that was a big moment in a big game. When they beat LSU, number one team in the country, when Coach Brooks was here. And then the one that'll always stand out for me is just the very first game I did in August 30th, 1997, Kentucky-Louisville. And, when my very first game, and when the Kentucky quarterback throws 3 touchdowns against Louisville in the first quarter, you tend to sound better.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to Tim.
It doesn't hurt, no doubt.
Oh man, that I still remember being a kid, and that was before cell phones, and people would put the chairs on top of their cars to find the tailgates. And I remember Hal Mummy's first game, somebody had wrapped up a dummy as a mummy, and that was the kind of beacon to find their tailgate. I enjoyed that Hal Mummy era. That was something else. That was something else.
Yeah, and I'm always grateful to Hal. He was gave me tremendous access, so I learned a lot as a first-time broadcaster at that level.
Was there, because I know you kind of called games at the high school ranks. How did you get your big break where you were pretty young starting out helping Kaywood Ledford out in the booth?
Yeah, I started in '89, so that would have been 28, doing the scoreboard show. The station I worked at the time was WVLK, and they were the flagship for the Kentucky network. And so that was kind of where I wanted to be, was there to try to get on the team, so to speak, for the UK network, and got to do the scoreboard show for 8 years until got the chance to do play-by-play when Ralph stepped aside from football in '97. And so, I think being on the team was the strategy that worked for me. Usually you have to, go somewhere else and then come back if it's fortunate enough the timing and everything works out. So I was fortunate enough to be able to kind of stay at home and come up through the ranks and get the opportunity. And yeah, again, it's part of it is just, Kaywood told me one time, you sound better when they win. And, when I started in '97, they started putting up a bunch of points with Couch and Yeast and those guys. And it was a lot of fun, and fans were having fun. And so they liked what they were hearing. The team was doing pretty well.
You were fortunate, and Kentucky fans are fortunate too, to be able to hear you call so many great games over the years. We're lucky. We get, when we're traveling around the SEC, we get some of these hacks at the other schools. They might be your friends, but hearing we got it. It makes me that Georgia crew, when I got to hear them just kissing their own
Larry
team's
Munson
butts.
is Larry Munson's a legend. Late Larry Munson. a legend in sports, college football broadcasting. And Larry, was the, we, and they, and that Kaywood was not that way, and nor Ralph, and so that's who I kind of came up under. So it's not a right or wrong, but it's Kaywood always told me, it's okay if you're doing games for one team, that the fans know that you want to see them win, but you still don't, you we and they, it's they're on the team, you're not, and so that's kind of always been my approach. But it's kind of whatever, whoever you come up under, I think, has a lot of effect on that. And so I came up under the best.
Yeah, and
no doubt about that.
You're certainly one of the best there is, and the Big Blue Nation, certainly grateful to have you around.
Thanks.
We're going to be extra grateful when you help make some picks this weekend, win some people some money, and KSR listeners, they can make some money by betting any track anywhere with Naira Bets. Promo code is KSR25. You'll get a free $25 Derby bet when you sign up, and up to $200 in deposit bonuses. Promo code KSR25 at Naira Bets. And Tom, there's an old saying about teaching a man to fish versus giving him one. So I know a lot of people, they just want to be handed these picks on a platter.
Oh man, that's me, Tom.
But when you're reading a program and what are you looking at to try to find one of these live long shots to hit a big price at the racetrack?
Well, if it's just any average day, as opposed to a race like the Derby, that's there's so much more coverage of, and you get more access to coverage of trainers and jockeys, etc. But just on an average day, you can purchase things like workout reports, which can be helpful. Like kind of Bruno DiGiulio, I use his report and get some good access, good info there. The racing form, I use the Beyer speed figures. That's kind of what I've grown up learning how to handicap. Use those, and there are other kinds of speed figures that you could use. Whatever you use, I think you kind of look for patterns. Look for here's an example with Will Levis. We'll use Will as an example. I said on the air leading up to the draft, if you liked him after his first year, don't look at anything in the next year, because that was kind of the equivalent of a throwout race.
Yes.
It's like drawing the 14 hole in a race with a short run to the first turn. He had subpar offensive line, was injured early, young receivers, lost his best running back to start. A lot of factors going against him to negate the chances of being able to perform at your best. So if you liked him after year one, focus on that. With horses, sometimes, if a horse has shown you he or she has the ability, then, if you can find a way to discount the bad performances that are legit. Sometimes you talk yourself into bad bets by not realizing the horse is showing you who they really are. But if you can find some legit reasons to excuse what looks like a poor performance, then you can and realize that it was actually a better performance than it looks on paper. There's where you find the long shots.
I was looking ahead for Thursday and Friday's races. Haven't got all the way into Saturday, but in the Thursday feature, the horse Annapolis was 5 wins in 2 seconds and 7 starts. Then it gets a bad trip in the Breeders' Cup Mile, comes in 11th. It might end up being the favorite in that race, might not, but that's a great example of in some of these you just kind of got to toss it to the side, move forward. I know there's a couple horses you might be able to make that case in the Derby. Before we get to the Derby, the Kentucky Oaks is on Friday, and just looking at this race, Tom, it might be more loaded than the actual Derby field, the way that some of these have performed leading into the Derby. Have you been able to take a closer look at the Kentucky Oaks to see which filly might potentially wear the lilies Friday at Churchill Downs?
Yeah, I do a podcast for Keeneland's advanced deposit wagering site with their mutuals guy, Jim Goodman, and we do it all throughout the year on the weekends. And so we've actually already taped the one for Friday. And the 3 fillies I like best of the Oaks in no particular order are Affirmative Lady, South Lawn, and Botanical. And none of the fillies in the race have run any, particularly impressive figures. So that tends to lead you to think it's a more wide open race, and you don't want a short price or the favorites in those kinds of races. And Affirmative Lady is a horse that I look at, sometimes you handicap the humans. The trainer, Graham Motion, pretty conservative with his horses, doesn't make a lot of bold moves. And he put her in a grade 2 stake as a maiden, and she almost won it. So clearly they had a high opinion of her. Seemed like the last couple of races, the light bulb went on for her. And Motion's not a guy that comes here every year for Oaks and Derby, and this is his first Oaks starter in 12 years. So those kind of things are interesting to me. So I like Affirmative Lady. 13 post is not great, but you'll get rewarded for the price for taking a little risk. And so I like her. And Botanical's got speed. Southlawn very impressive last time in their race at the fairgrounds. So in a wide open race, I'm looking for a little bit of a price at least, and I'll probably put those three in a box. And if I have to pick somebody on top, I'll pick Affirmative Lady.
Affirmative Lady ridden by Johnny V too, so hard to go wrong there. I'm a big Graham Motion turf horse. If he's got one on the turf, I can't toss it. But you mentioned Botanical too, and that was Brad Cox. He's been exceptional in the Oaks in the last few years. Monomoy Girl and She Dares the Devil were both stars for him, and Wet Paint's going to end up being the morning line. Well, it is the morning line favorite, but Botanical at 4-1. The horse is steadily improved his speed figures in 4 straight wins, and really ran away from the competition in the last 2, kind of building that lead down the stretch. And I know for a lot of these horses, it's all about getting that extra distance, which takes me to the Derby, where there's a similar horse. It's getting a little backside buzz. Steve Asmussen's Disarm, where if you just check where it finished, Tom, hasn't been great. I mean, they had to put him in the Lexington just to get enough points to qualify, but has improved his speed figures every time out, posted a 97 Brisnet in the Lexington Stakes. And I don't know what it is, but I feel like it would be Steve Asmussen's luck to have Epicenter this close from the Derby winner, the front runner the whole time, arguably the best 3-year-old the entire season, come up short and then win as a 15 to 20-1 long shot with Disarm the following year.
That would be far from the most surprising result that could come from this year's Derby for me. I think that horse looks really good. And yeah, I'm no workout analyst, but you can just see athletes that kind of have a presence or just seem to ooze confidence, and that seems like Disarm when I've watched the workouts or the gallops for that horse. And that's a horse that I think is going to probably run the best race of his life. Now, he's going to need to, because the best he's run so far wouldn't be good enough.
Right.
And if he runs the best race of his life, it still could only get 4th or 5th, perhaps, but also could get, first. He's a horse that I think is a good horse to key in like a trifecta, to key him in all 3 spots, maybe with other horses that you like, because at a big price, I think that's a horse that has definitely has a shot. You
were at the Bluegrass Stakes when Tappet Trice went toe-to-toe with Verifying. Both horses got 102 speed figure. I'm checking Brisnet PPs here, but Verifying ran, I thought, a great race. The race he wanted to run, was out ahead. Only Forte's the only other horse from the juvenile that's in there, so there's a lot of good pedigree there. But Tappet Trice was able to gut out. It really guts. I thought he made one move too early, and then he ended up having almost 2 or 3 more. Do you like Tappet Trice and think that this could end up being the horse to beat in the Kentucky Derby?
Yeah, I thought the Bluegrass was the best of the preps for me, and I like Tappet Trice and Verifying both. Those 2 and 2 fills are kind of the first bet I'll make on the Derby is a 3-horse box of those 3. I don't. My stronger opinion on this year's Derby is more who I don't like than who I'm certain I do. So I definitely want to look for a little price. And I thought Tappet Trice, probably second choice, I'm guessing, but he seemed to make a much improved run in the Bluegrass, and looks like a horse that, like Disarm, on the track in the mornings just seems to be reeks of confidence when you see him on the track. And I think he's the horse that I have done a couple Derby talks this week where I've said if I have to make a bet on who am I most confident will be in the top three, I'd probably bet on Tappet Trice to do that. The only thing is he likes to be, it's clear if you watch his races, he likes to be outside of horses. And he'll come from the back. I'm not worried about the 5 post, him being down inside. He'll drop towards the back. It's just what kind of trip can he work out?
Nope. Nope, we lost Tom, unfortunately.
He was given
to get to the outside of horses, and that's key for him. And so he's got to get to the outside of horses, I think, to have his best run. And can they do that? It's just you could bet him and feel like he's the best horse after the race, and he finished third. Or he could get the ideal trip and win by 2 or 3. But
just some connection issues. We'll be all right.
The scoop is so good, Nick, that the suits at Churchill are cutting us off right now. with their ever-wielding power, they're cutting us off.
Oh, man. They just don't want us making all the money, right? So they're they're kicking Tom out.
Yeah.
But there we go. Now we're rock and roll. We're good to go now, Tom.
We dropped out there for some reason, but I was just saying I think Tappet Trice is a really strong contender. It's just to get to the outside of a 20-horse field, it could be problematic. It just kind of, and you can't really know this until it plays out. If they bunch up and he has to go 10 wide, or does the field get a little spaced out and he goes 6 wide?
You mentioned 2 fills. I think a lot of people before Red Strike won last year would toss the Turfway horse on the all-weather surface, but obviously that's no longer a sort of disqualifier. But is there any sort of concerns about just the connections being so new to this? I mean, this is
not so much the trainer, I don't think, because he's been in the business forever. Larry Ravelli, Jareth Loveberry's riding in his first Derby. So that's, maybe gives you a little bit of pause. But if it's the right horse, Stuart Elliott won on Smarty Jones. There have been a lot of examples. Ronnie Franklin won on Spectacular Bid back in the day. So, if you're on the right horse. And the thing about the synthetic question, and it's an understandable question, did he just move up on the synthetic? But his dad, is Hardspun, and Hardspun won that same race, came back and had a very similar 5-furlong workout the week before the Derby, or actually the week of the Derby back in 2007, and beat everybody but Street Sense. So, I think on the pedigree standpoint, it's certainly possible he could, run big. So I was very impressed with that race. If he can run back to the race he ran at Turfway, then I think he's got a big shot.
It's a consistent board hitter. But you heard it here from Tom Leach. He likes 2 fills, verifying Tappet Trice. I'm trying to narrow my list of candidates down, but it's so hard because you can get talked into so many horses. But we appreciate you coming on here, helping folks win some money this weekend, talk a little Kentucky football. I did ask if there was on how to find a long shots, but have you found any on the undercard yet this weekend that you might like that say, we might be able to hit a big number here?
There's a horse in the turf sprint. I think it's on Saturday. They all kind of run together. I'm into handicapping the Saturday card for the podcast. Big Invasion in the turf sprint. I kind of like Christophe Clement and Joel Rosario. I think that's on Saturday, maybe a couple of races before the Derby or 3 or 4 races before the Derby. But anyway, whatever it is, it's the Churchill Downs turf sprint, I believe. And Big Invasion. It's probably the one so far that price relative to price, I kind of favorites that look strong, but for a little bit of a price, maybe Big Invasion.
That's the 4th horse in race number 7 Saturday at Churchill Downs. Tom Leach here helping us all make some money. Tom, thanks so much for giving us some time. I know you're a busy man. You got to get back to your program and breaking it all down. But thanks for giving us some time and all you do for Kentucky athletics, calling the best games that we've grown to know and love. And that might have just been perfect timing because it looks like his internet's cutting out again. Well, I guess I'll shoot him a text. Thank you. I Oh no! Now LG&E is saying they need to shut off my power here for a little bit. So this could get interesting here on 11 personnel. But yeah, Tom, thanks so much.
Thank you, Tom.
See ya.
Sorry,
and,
it got a little wonky there, but happy to join you guys, and hopefully we'll win a little money this weekend.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Happy Derby,
Thanks.
Tom. Appreciate it. Tom Leach, the voice of the Wildcats. Luckett, let's talk a little bit more Kentucky football before maybe my power gets shut off and we're really in scramble mode. The transfer portal closed, and what's up with this transfer portal? I thought there were supposed to be rules. Why is Buford hopping in after it's closed?
The answer is compliance doesn't work on Sunday, I guess would be the. But yeah, it's kind of a gray area, I would say. And like Nick, graduates can just go whenever, right?
It's true.
They can just leave whenever. So there's no rules really on them. So yeah, it's just they snuck the window up on us. They moved it up 2 weeks. And I think why they did that is because now all the decisions are going to be made in May. They didn't want decisions being made around Memorial Day. Now we're going to see, I think in the next week or so, you're going to see a lot of guys making their decisions. And for Kentucky this past week, a bit of a surprise with David Wollabaugh and DeAndre Buford entering in at the portal at the last possible minute, even a week after the Cortland Ford news. So it looks like they thought about that long and hard, and they decided to move on. And that knocks Kentucky down to 6 scholarship tackles as of right now.
And I know depth is obviously a concern, but the way that I put it, Luckett, is that you don't cut off your nose to spite your face, and Kentucky can afford to sacrifice some depth to upgrade the talent at the position. Would you rather have Cortland Ford starting, or would you rather it be Flack / Buford just to be able to keep Buford and Wollabaugh? Like the scales are you just roll it with Cortland Ford. So, well, it's unfortunate, and you'd like to have at least one of those guys to provide some quality depth. That's kind of, as we alluded to when talking with Tom, like it's just very difficult to do that in the transfer portal era.
Well, this would be a good time to do my weekly KSR Plus plug. Today, this is Wednesday, every week, I wrote a post today that ended up going pretty long, but it was basically kind of the state of the offensive line. To me, in my opinion, where I'm looking at, nothing has affected the 2023 team. They have, I think, their 7 guys that they're going to roll with. If you're getting into your 8th and 9th guy, most offensive lines are going to be upstream without a paddle.
Yeah.
So you're going to be in trouble regardless. They still have their top 7 guys. For better or worse, they're rolling with Cortland Ford at right tackle. Jeremy Flax is going to be their swing tackle. If something happened to Marcus Cox, they would kick Ford to the left. Jeremy Flax would play right tackle. I think Tanner Bowles is their 3rd guard, and he's being pushed by Paul Rodriguez. And then Jagger Burton at center. Something happened to him, Eli Cox would play center. You've got your backups where if any type of injury happens, you know exactly what you're going to do. So you're rolling with that 7 this year, but that's not even to me the question of the line. The question is talent development. Can they develop the talent on the roster? Let's throw the first year out for Zach Inzer, 3rd offensive line coach in 3 years. If you think Rich Scangarello was the biggest bum to ever call plays, whatever. But now, now it's put up or shut up time, I think, for Inzer. Like, he's got to be able to, he's got the pieces now. You've got to be able to play productive football at the line of scrimmage. Secondly, I think they're just built different. They're not going to just be, they don't have all these road graders on the line. Mm-hmm. They're going to have to be a little bit more creative.
Yeah.
But I think they have some pass pro upside as well. So I think that helps. But the big kicker to this, and this is my biggest worry, is just the high school recruiting, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
Since the class of 2019, you go 3 classes in a row, 2019, 2020, 2021. They have signed 9 high school offensive line prospects. Jagger Burton, Eli Cox are the only players to be starters. Paul Rodriguez maybe might hit. Even if he does hit, that's a 33.3% hit rate. You've just missed. Like, Josh Jones is still on the roster, but we don't know. I mean, we don't ever hear anything of him. He was running with the threes during the spring. David Wallaball gone. DeAndre Buford gone. Jake Pope transferred to FCS. RJ Adams transferred to Georgia Tech, then he transferred to Memphis. John Young is in the MAC. There's just a lot of misses here, and I think that is the root of their problems to me. And how do you fix your problems? You fix them through recruiting. But this is not quarterback. This is not receiver. This is not safety. This is not cornerback. Like, if you're having to go to the portal and get 2 to 3 guys every year, like they just had to do this year, you're just not, you're going to be in trouble. I mean, you're going to have issues. So they have to get that fixed. They have to get it fixed through recruiting. And Yinzer has to show he can put together a solid line. And so the next 6 months, I think we're going to learn a lot. I mean, the whole season is about this line. I mean, I wrote that big thing, but I'm sure I'm going to write a lot more about him, and we're going to talk a lot about him, even before a game starts, because they are the season in a lot of ways. We know the defense is probably going to be pretty good. We think Devin Leary's good. We know the receivers are good. We know they got a deep, tight end room, but can they block anybody? And we think Liam Cohen is a good play caller, but can he do anything if guys can't block?
Yeah.
That's Kentucky football 2023 in a nutshell right now.
Well, and to go back to the recruiting, when they were getting recruiting hits, it was, I don't know, all Americans from the state of Kentucky. They got pretty fortunate that Drake Jackson and Landon Young grew up a stone's throw away. And
you get Kennard and Fortner out of Ohio. They turned Georgia Safe J out of Ohio. They turned into draft picks.
Yeah, yeah. They went from, almost 60-70% hit rate to 30. Well, that's not you got to find somewhere in between, right? You got to find somewhere in between. That's the secret to the sauce. But the recruiting, it's active. There'll be less. The visits are really cranking up in June. We'll have more of that when that comes. But first, I do need to remind you that Monticello Bank has been banking for the people for 128 years. 128 years, like it. That's almost as long as they've been running this Kentucky Derby. A long time providing service. And the best part, too, is now, wherever you go, whenever you go, the Go NBC mobile app is right there with you. So do what you should do. Monticello Bank, where people matter, 21 branches, 14 different markets. Their customer-focused financial service, which makes the numbers on your side of life a little bit easier. Visit mbcbank.com. Monticello Bank, where people matter, member FDIC, equal housing lender. One of those official visits, Jacob Smith, Zach Gagan just reported Jacob Smith is officially visiting the same weekend Cutter Boley is. That's significant in the high school ranks, and then also significant in the transfer portal ranks. It's closed for people to enter, but you're still recruiting all those guys. And here in 2 weeks, they'll have, I believe it's 2 weeks, like it, Antonio Carter from Rhode Island, and then the linebacker, I just keep wanting to call him Ragnar from Northern Illinois. He might hit like the old Minnesota Vikings mascot. Both of those players will be in for official visits here in a couple of weeks.
Rayner, Devarin Rayner, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He actually shows up on the 11th, May 11th is when his starts. So that's just over a week away. And then I believe Carter's a couple days after him. And Carter is on record saying he took visits to Ole Miss and I'm blanking on the other, maybe Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin and Ole Miss. And he's going to take one more visit, then he's going to decide. So Kentucky's firmly in the mix there. And then Rayner is a linebacker. He's got P5 interest. Kentucky is the only visit I've seen scheduled that's been publicized, at least. So that could be promising. And so, yeah, they're not done. They're going to add 2, 3, 4 more guys, I would imagine. They have the room, the scholarship capital room. And so they're going to add guys. It's just what guys do they add. Those are 2 to watch here over the next week. But they're in a position, Nick, where, like, if this was a draft, they're not drafting starters. Like, their starters are established at this point after you got Cortland Ford. Mm-hmm. They're looking for depth. And they're not, and I think at these positions, they're looking for guys with multiple years of eligibility, guys that can be here for a little bit, not just a one and done. Because they got enough one and dones for the portal to come in and start. Leary, Marcus Cox. Now that they need some depth and some guys that'll be here for a couple years. And so I think that's what they're looking for. And I think Devarin Rayner and Antonio Carter both fit that because they have 2 years of eligibility remaining. So they're probably guys that they would sell them on, come in, be a backup for a year, and you probably have a chance to start in 2024.
At least in the case for Carter, he might be talented enough to compete at the cornerback position, even though they've already brought in 2 transfers. We're in best available territory. Just get the best players you can. You've got some scholarship capital. Don't want to take up too much with dead weight down the road. But if you can get some hits like they did late with Zion Childress last year, it's worth it. It's totally worth it. Luckett, it is. I hate to need to wrap a little bit early, but I think that's going to have to be the case because we might be losing some internet. But I am capping early this week so we can get some picks out there. I'll have some of those on the site, but I mentioned them to Tom already. Really like Botanical in that Philly in the Oaks race on Friday, and man, something about Verify. I wasn't gonna. I got I like my guy Brad Cox, right? I thought I was going to Angel of Empire, but I'm just keep getting talked into Verifying. It's just it's so tough for me to try to whittle this down. But if you do anything like it, whatever you do this weekend, for the love of God, do not place any money on Rich Strike. You can just pour your money out, piss on it, and light it on fire, and you'll be doing better than betting on Rich Strike. Do not bet on the Kentucky Derby winner. Save yourself. Don't do it, Luckett, please.
I hope you just didn't get Otex exposed right there.
I'd love to. I'd love to be hit with it. But the Friday card is pretty loaded. Getting ready to get into Saturday. If you're going to make a bet to do the Oaks Derby double, it's just fun. Just got to pick winners for each one. And if a bomb hits, we could be having ourselves a very, very happy weekend here at Churchill Downs. Look, are you going to be able to make it to the track any this week? Any Thursday, Friday action?
I will not. I will not be making the track, unfortunately. Nick, you go have your fun, but I'll hold down the website for you. Someone's got to be here in case something happens. So I will wear that badge proudly, but I will be getting after it a little bit on Saturday. Don't you worry.
I appreciate it, Luckett, because last week you were up to your shoulders in NFL draft content. I feel like that's me right now with the Derby, where I saw they offered the wide receiver kid, and it's like, okay, I can only sure they offered it, but like
you don't have the bandwidth for that right now.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of the program. Here's a pick that I will be sharing on the website for Thurby. Really like he's going to be kind of a live shot. It's the 2 in the race 3. He'll be like 10-1, 12-1. He's got a couple favorites. I like the 2 in race 3 on Thurby. And in race 4, this is very inside. We have Brad Cox. It's a sprint race. You got Brad Cox. He won a maiden special out at Keeneland. Same race, ran like a 90. Wesley Ward ran almost the same race, same price, different day at Keeneland, like a 1 point lower, 1-1 versus 6-5 morning line favorite. So a true duel between 2 horses. That'll be fun in race 3. But man, it's going to be a lot of fun. Oh, and I had another one too that. I'm posting them on the website. I normally don't do picks on the website, but I'm at least going to have a couple for 2 days, along with my final Derby selections. I can't get more than like 5 horses, because that feels like I'm cheating, right? Like, you just come on, yeah, you got to narrow it down to 5 potential winners here. But I'm excited. I'm so excited. This is so much fun. We've got a lot of great stuff coming to the KSR YouTube channel. We hung out with Travis Stone, the Churchill Downs racetrack announcer. Look, we were on the freaking roof of the track. I felt like I was like, they let me up here? What the hell
like a Churchill Downs suit.
Yeah, I mean, it was really cool. That's coming out on the KSR YouTube channel tonight. And then, as much as we see these horses out on the track, I mean, you've been to a racetrack. You've probably never been to a horse farm. So we're taking you to a horse farm, the horse farm where Tappet Trice was bred, to kind of show you what it's like for the first 2 years of a horse's life. That's dropping on Thursday. So a lot of great stuff coming to the KSR YouTube channel. And please, subscribe. We're so close to 20,000 subscribers. I'm sure all of you all watching already are, but if you're subscribed, you're notified the instant we go live, so you don't miss any of Tom Leach or any of our great guests on the KSR YouTube channel. When Hunter Dickinson commits to Kentucky and Jack Pilgrim does rapid reaction, you got to be ready for the takes. So subscribe right now. Help us get over that threshold of 20,000, and we greatly, greatly appreciate it. Whew.
That it? You did?
Yeah. I got it.
Scale